For more on this, I'm joined by Miloon Kothari, Urban Studies and Planning Professor at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, or MIT. Sir, thank you for being on the program.
Thanks, yeah.
So we saw on that piece that Bogota's mayor is trying to develop a plan to put low-income women in wealthy areas of Bogota. Do these types of integration plans help foster economic growth? Because critics say it will only emphasize the difference between the haves and have-nots.
Well, yes, I think first we have to remember that Bogota is one of the most segregated cities in the world, where there are zones where the rich live and zones where the poor live. So just a small project like this is not going to get to the root of the problem, aside from the fact that there will be a huge income and opportunity gap between the rich and the poor who move to the area. So I don't see this as a very radical solution. I think we need other sort of city-wide approaches that that respect the poor, and this doesn't seem to be that kind of an approach.
So how do we address the root of the problem? What needs to be done by city officials in a place like Bogota?
Well, I think that it's not only Bogota. There are many cities across the world. There are two issues that we rarely hear about in business circles. I think if you look around the world today, two issues really are striking. One is that there's increasing ghettoization and segregation across the world. We are actually seeing the creation of more and more apartheid cities where there are clear demarcations between where the rich and the poor live. And along with that, we are also seeing increasing criminalization of the poor, of the homeless. We are seeing more and more anti-vagrancy and anti-beggary laws. So essentially what we need to do is we need to plan our cities, particularly in anticipation of the massive urbanization that is coming. We need to plan our cities with a human rights approach, essentially to say that the city should be planned around the needs of the most vulnerable. We do have one good example, at least in law, which is the city statute in Brazil, which makes it mandatory on municipalities to designate what they call zones of social interest. So areas where lower income people live, to give them security of tenure and to provide civic services. So we need that kind of an approach that is inclusive of lower income neighborhoods. But we are not seeing that. What we are seeing is increasing, plans for urban redevelopment, city beautification, infrastructure, which are actually displacing thousands and thousands of people and actually concentrating them into areas that are already marginalized. So we need a radical rethinking of the way in which our cities are designed and planned.
So, Mr. Kothari, you mentioned human rights. When most people think about human rights, housing is not really what comes to mind, but it is a human right. It is a right for everyone to have adequate housing, isn't it? And yet it is so difficult around the world.
Yes, it is. It's a right that's recognized in international human rights instruments. Most countries in the world have ratified these instruments, and it's not being implemented. Essentially, the problem is that there is too much commodification of land and property. There's too much of a focus on speculating on land and property, and not enough of an attempt to recapture what used to be called, but what is still a very valid concept of the social function of property. For most people in the world, the reality is they're never going to own a house. For most people in the world, we need different solutions that are around rental housing, around cooperatives, around shelters for the homeless. And that's not the trend that we are seeing. We are in fact seeing more and more commercialization. We are not. I haven't actually come across a single good example where cities are trying to regulate and control the runaway speculation that we see in land and property. So even where efforts are being made, such as here in the United States, in New York City, that Mayor de Blasio is trying with his affordable housing scheme, it's a very piecemeal effort because, New York City is also the home of some of the, most blatant and runaway speculation and gentrification, which is actually leading to the displacement of many more people than will be accommodated by affordable housing. So unless there are measures to regulate the market, and unless there are measures to actually halt the kind of displacement that is taking place, all these other measures don't really add up to very much.
All right. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much. Miloon Kothari joining us from MIT.